Thank you, Willa and Ronnie, for inviting me to come and get to speak to the group. I've been pleased to get to work with clients of both of yours throughout the last several years and even more frequently in the last several months. And as Willa said, the resource is amazing because I get clients coming over who are just starting their business, as well as people who are looking to monetize their exit and others just seeking help. So you guys really do go through all the life stages of a business, and you're a terrific resource. I refer people back to you as well. So so you probably see people coming from my firm, but thank you. Today's a fun topic. It's the base of everything. It's called choosing the appropriate legal entity for your new business. And this is one that I speak on constantly. It's one that I get asked about every day. Just this past week, I have helped 5 people start legal entities. So my business is very busy helping and launching new entrepreneurs. So I'm glad to talk to you about this. As we go through, if you don't understand something, if you need help, let me know so that, raise your hand, type it in the chat box. And I have a belief that Leslie is going to keep me on track with that. I believe Leslie keeps lots of people on track. And she's going to start with me today. So let's get started without any further ado. Let's see if I can figure out how to make all things work. Okay, here's the agenda. I want to talk about reasons to form a legal entity. What are the types of legal entities? We're going to talk about S-Corp versus LLC. We'll talk about key documents in forming an entity and once they're up and running, things you need, and what is different if you are a licensed professional. All of these have slightly different things. And of course, as I said, I welcome interaction. There's nothing worse than feeling like you're speaking into the abyss. And so please let me know if there's something that you want to hear about. Reasons to, oh, goodness gracious me. Here we go. Reasons to form a legal entity. Look, the number one reason you do not want to be a sole proprietor is limited liability. And limited liability means that you are protecting your personal assets, which is a picture of show me the money, right? You want to protect your home, your car, your retirement savings, your kids' savings account, all of your assets. You want to put a firewall between you and them. And the way you do that is by having a legal entity. A sole proprietor does not do that, and you really want to be careful. Typically, an owner of an entity is not personally liable for the debts, obligations, and liabilities of the business. Now, there are a couple exceptions to that, and I can discuss them, but by and large, this is the thing that saves you by having an entity. Number 2, another key reason to form an entity is certainty. When you form an entity, you know how it's going to work. If you form a corp or if you form an LLC, those are the 2 main ones that I'm going to be discussing today because they are the ones that my clients choose 99% of the time. You know and document how the company will be run. How do we make money? How do we distribute money when we get the money? If it's more than one person, who makes decisions and how? And if it's more than one person, what happens if I don't want to be a part of the company anymore? How do I get out of here? So you want to definitely have the certainty behind the entity. And finally, attractiveness to investors. Now, this may or may not matter to you. You may say, I don't care. It's just going to be me. I'm never going to have an investor. But you should also think about banks and people who extend capital and credit to you. They like to see an entity as well. So even getting a line of credit, and I bet Willa and Ronnie can attest to this, when the IDLs and other monies first came down in the pandemic, S-Corps got it faster than LLCs, and they got it faster than sole proprietors, right? That's at least what my experience was. So it's important to get yourself set up so that you have access to capital when you need it. And also it's a lot easier to sell your business when you decide that you want to go sit on a beach and drink little umbrella drinks and enjoy your life. You can sell an entity. You can't sell your sole proprietorship because there's nothing to sell other than some assets that you would pull together. All right. Any questions about that so far?
No, except that I didn't know that the loans went first to S-Corps. That was an interesting fact.
It was a lot easier for them to show on their tax returns the need for it and to prove employees. There was a lot of jiggering in the background that had to take place for the banks and all to recognize LLCs in the process. I know I'm a PLLC and I was ticked off that I hadn't formed myself as a PC. So anyway, there are three main types of entities that I want to talk about. Actually, there are two main types of entities, and one, I'm going to address the pitfalls of the sole proprietorship. That is not an entity. And before the conversation this began, Tim and I were talking about his cousin, I believe he said, who is an attorney who runs his practice as a sole proprietor. I have another client who was also an attorney who ran his business as a sole proprietorship, and he had 10 employees. And guess what? One of those employees sued him for employment discrimination. And do you know what happened? Every single one of his personal assets, which were substantial, were at risk because of a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. Do not be a sole proprietor and run your business. Don't do it. It's not worth it. It is so inexpensive relatively to set up an entity and take care of it than to put your house, your home, your savings, all of that at risk. The next type of entity is a corporation. There's a thing you may have heard of, a C-corp or an S-corp. I'll talk about what the differences are there. It's more about taxation than anything else. And the last is a limited liability company. So for most entrepreneurs, the choice is between an S-corp and an LLC. And I want to talk about what are the differences and why they are important. So an LLC, an S-corp is a tax election. And what I mean by that is when you form a corporation, it's called a corporation. It's a C-corp. You have to go and file a tax filing with both the federal and the state governments and say, I want to have an election to be an S-corp. An S-corp makes it akin to an LLC by bringing the taxation down from the corporate level to the personal level. What do I mean? And you may have heard the term disregarded entity. Has anyone ever heard that term?
No.
No? Okay. So if you talk to accountants, which is always a fun thing, they'll tell you about disregarded entities. And what that means is the IRS, for purposes of taxation, disregards, doesn't think, doesn't see the entity, but instead looks down to the ownership of the entity to apply the tax. Now, this is good for most entrepreneurs. In a corporation, let's take Best Buy, for example, okay? Best Buy is a big company. They have stock, they have shareholders, they have employees. When Best Buy is at the end of the year and they file taxes, Best Buy Inc. files a tax return for all of the money and the revenue that it received as a company throughout the year. And theoretically, it pays taxes on the revenue that it received. Whatever the tax rate is, doesn't matter. It pays taxes on what the company itself got. Then all of the employees of Best Buy, from the CEO down to the stock person, they also file tax returns based on their W-2s of the money that they were given for working at Best Buy. So the company is taxed at the corporate level, and then each employee is taxed at the individual level. Okay, everyone follow that? I'm seeing heads. Okay, good. So what's a disregarded entity? If Best Buy were disregarded, which it is not, there would be no taxation at the Best Buy level, and all the money would only be taxed down at the employee level. We only do this when it is a small business, right? It's a smaller business. So if I'm an S-Corp, all the money I make, let's say I made $10 million at my company level, that $10 million revenue income is not taxed at Francine Love Makes a Lot of Money, Inc. When I pay myself that money, it goes down to my personal tax return, and I pay money on my income there. So the beauty of an S-Corp and the LLC works the same way. Love Law Firm does not get taxed on its income at the top. It gets taxed when I give myself money out of the business. I take distributions, then I pay taxes on the distributions. It's a form of avoiding double taxation, this disregarded entity. And this is very important for entrepreneurs, because you don't pay tax twice. And both the S-Corp and the LLC allow you to do that. There's a thing for business owners called self-employment tax, because as we all know, we have this program called Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, and those are funded by payroll taxes here in the US. And the way that you pay them is by being an employee, and you get a paycheck, and we all know, it says you get paid $1,000 a week, but by the time taxes are taken out, including your FICA contribution and others, it gets reduced a little, right? In an S-Corp, that's true. That happens because an S-Corp requires the business owner to employ themselves and to pay themselves a reasonable salary, okay? We can talk about what that means. An LLC doesn't require that. I can, as an LLC owner, I can take money in and out of the company whenever I want, however much I want, and there's no issue about that. But an LLC owner gets hit with a self-employment tax, which makes up for the payroll taxes that the IRS would have received if you had been an employee. So I want to point this out because it's important if you're making a lot of money. All right. In New York State, if your new entity, if you expect it to have income of more than $90,000 in any given year, it is probably best, and you can of course and should talk to your tax professional, but it is most likely in your best interest to form an S-Corp rather than an LLC, because you will avoid the self-employment tax, and you will get some other offsets that are available through paying yourself a reasonable salary. So the S-Corps and LLCs do the same thing, limited liability, disregarded entity. But based on how much money you earn, you should consider whether you want to form an S-Corp or an LLC based on taxation. Now, maybe you say, oh, I'm an LLC and I earn more than 90,000. Am I just out of luck, or do I need to reform? You don't necessarily have to. An LLC can actually file a form with the IRS and ask to be taxed like an S-Corp, which is kind of a fun thing too. And you can talk to your tax professional about that. So there's a way to get that tax benefit later. You can convert it to an S-Corp tax. But if you know going off the start that you're going to have more than 90,000 in income, it's probably best to form an S-Corp from the beginning, because then you don't have to make other tax elections. That goes to our next one on limitation of ownership. And that was my next point, is in an S-Corp, you can only have 100 shareholders, and all of them have to be US citizens, and they have to be real people. Now, this is a big thing. For Carl, if he's thinking about having someone who's non-US, they can't own part of an S-Corp. And two, Willa was getting at this point, which is LLCs can be owned by LLCs. And you can have multiple LLCs own an LLC. This is something that I do a lot of times when I had this recently. I have two people who both have very successful businesses already. They are both, one was an S-Corp, one's a Corp and one's an LLC, and they want to do a project together. So we formed an LLC for them, and the LLC units are owned by each of their entities, right? And so we kept it all in a corporate structure. The nice thing about that is it keeps all of their entities aligned. It keeps an ownership structure for business accounting. It allows them to maintain some privacy with ownership. So it does that. And but you can't do that with an S-Corp. I can't have someone form an S-Corp and then my LLC own a share of it. I have to own it as a person, and I have to be a US citizen. And in an S-Corp, I can't have more than 100 investors. In an LLC, you can have multiple investors. They can be an entity, they can be a real person, and they can be anywhere in the world. An informal and flexible structure is part of what is attractive about an LLC, not only for the types of owners that we can talk about, but all of us have heard of a board of directors, right? The company has a board of directors, and those board of directors go and hire officers, and those officers go and do the work of the company. An LLC doesn't have that. It either has a member or a manager that runs the company on behalf of the owner. And there is no requirement that you have meetings of shareholders, because you don't have shareholders. You don't have to elect a board of directors. You don't have to appoint officers. You don't have to have that formal structure. New York State requires by law that all companies, S-Corp and C-Corp, hold annual meetings of the board of directors and shareholders. And you have to take minutes of both of those meetings, and you have to say what happened in those meetings. That's the minutes, make resolutions and take action. An LLC can write in their operating agreement that they're never going to have a meeting, right? We're only going to meet, if we ever make decisions, we're going to write them down and the resolutions will carry. So an LLC can have a much more informal and flexible structure than a corp does, because a corp has to fall within New York State corporation rules. So that's an important thing to know. And then finally, the ability to raise capital and obtain loans. An S-Corp has a little bit easier access to those. First off, the ability to raise capital, it's easy. You can sell shares. Oh, and I meant to mention up on limitation of ownership before for an S-Corp. Another one of the limitations is that you can only have one class of stock. People may have heard about companies having common and preferred stock, right? Common stock in a company means that it's just one of the regular shares. Preferred means that you have accepted less voting rights, but you get paid more money and you get paid first. So you agree to limit your control of the company in exchange for more money. An S-Corp cannot do that. They can only have common stock. An LLC, however, can have a really complex waterfall that describes how money is paid out. For example, I have a company right now, we're out trying to raise about $5 million for the LLC to take off. We are offering a very complex structure where we have founder member units, investor member units, incentive member units, and comp units. And each one gets paid money on a different rate. And we have a preference for people who are investors because they're getting the real cash, and they get money first, and then the founders get money, and then the incentive people get money, and then the other. Like, it's a very complex transaction. I can do that in an LLC. I can't do that in an S-Corp. So if you think you're going to go and raise capital and it's going to be very complex, an LLC may be the way to go. If you're looking to just straight up raise capital and sell stock, then an S-Corp may be it. But of course, There's securities laws and regulations. If you intend to offer securities for sale to the public, you need to talk to me or to some other business lawyer to make sure you don't run afoul of the SEC. Having said all of that, the ability to get a loan as an S-Corp is easier because they have the documentation that banks are used to seeing. Banks are faster in processing loans and credit for S-Corps than they are for LLCs, because LLCs can be complicated and they can have some interesting twists and turns. And so much of the money is tied up and how's the right way? It can be difficult for them to distinguish between owner money and LLC money, even with clear documentation. Banks have a harder time. So if you're worried about getting credit, getting loans, raising capital, you should really talk to someone like me to see which is the best place for you to go. S-Corps have easy access with some limitations. LLCs, the asterisks mean, yes, they can do it, but we think about it carefully as we go through. Yes, Willa.
Yes, I would just add, as a former commercial lender, the LLC, when you're a small business, we usually require personal guarantees.
That's correct.
So if you're an LLC that's owned by LLCs, they have to peel that onion back to get to the person behind the LLC, which can get complicated if you have a lot of players involved, and then determine who has majority interest and all of that. That's why it makes it more difficult for a bank to do a loan with an LLC. Some LLCs are just single owners or a couple of owners, but some are owned by other LLCs, and then it gets really complex.
Thank you, Willa.
You're welcome.
Thank you for sharing that. So let's talk about sole proprietors for a moment. It's easy to start, right? Hi, I'm in business, Fran's biz, but it doesn't work. Most people, when they're a sole proprietor, will at least go and file a DBA somewhere, right? A DBA, doing business as. It allows you to call yourself, quick and easy consulting, or, Dewey, Cheatham and Howe law offices, or, something like that. So it's easy and fast, but there are no, like I said, there's no protection for your personal life. If you get 1 point out of today, do not be a sole proprietor. Find an entity, get it, use it. You can't have investors really in a sole proprietor, because then they're giving you a gift of money, right? And gifts are limited by the IRS, or it's going to be a loan, and then there's no way for people to invest in your business. And if you die, the business is gone too. It doesn't continue after you, because it is you. You are the sole proprietor. It's all about you. And your personal assets are a risk. My friend or a client who had the multi-million-dollar lawsuit from an employee for discrimination, all of his assets were at risk. And I said, and he came to me years, he'd been running his company, or his practice, not his company. And I'm like, you're such a smart guy. Why did you never form an entity? Like, what's going on here? And, inertia. No, don't go with inertia. Protect yourself, please.
Francine, can I just ask you one question before you move on past this?
Right.
So I do have a lot of people who are startup, very, very small. They want to sell something on the internet, handmade soap or candles or jewelry that they're making, or they do craft shows and that kind of thing. I mean, really individual, small craftspeople, small businesses. They ask me about forming an entity, and I tell them, you know what? Start as a sole proprietorship. I do recommend that, because I feel like until they see if the business takes off, until they see if they have sales. I mean, I do tell the story about how I was once injured by handmade soap that had pumice in it, and I ended up looking at my legs and I was bleeding. I mean, I didn't go and sue the soap maker, but somebody might. I mean, if they could prove that there was negligence, right? Now, that's the other thing too. So that's that question. That's that comment. I don't know whether.
Yeah. Look, I think if you're selling anything that can be applied to the body or ingested, you sure as heck better have an entity, because you just need to hurt one person to lose everything. And, if you had sold me that soap and I put that on my little baby, and my
Yes.
baby's bleeding, I'm going to come
Yes.
after you. If it comes to me,
Right.
whatever, I'm tough, I'll live with it. But
Right.
you just have to injure the wrong person, right? And you
Mhm.
never know. You don't get to pick the person who's injured. I agree with you. Like, you got to test concepts, and you got to know if, my homemade macrame is really going to be the best seller to justify the cost of setting up an entity. I
Right.
get that. But at the same time, if I'm serious about starting a business, and you guys know exactly what I mean about serious about a business. A hobby is one thing. I'm talking to people who intend to make money
Right.
by spending time and effort and trying to achieve a goal. So you have a business plan, you have ideas about how you're going to market, you're trying to bring it to the public for sale. Once you're at that point, you've kind of tested the idea, you believe there's a market. I think you need to get quickly to an entity. I agree with you, Ronnie, that you got to figure out if anyone wants what you're selling, right? But that should be a very short period of time, because the longer you're out there doing that, the
Yes.
more that time for people to be injured. Also, they can be injured, slip and fall, get hurt, coming to you, going to you. You could misrepresent the entity, the product. You may do consulting, and you may promise them that they'll double their profits if they work with you, and then they don't, and now you have professional liability. So it's just, once you are serious about monetizing your work, you should get it to where you are professional in presentation. So once you're a corporation, here's how it works. Ownership is through stock issuance. So you get a share of stock, you own one share of the company. The company decides how many shares of stock. I have one company, they issued literally one share of stock to the owner, and he was done. And it was cute. I'm like, you don't want more? He's like, do I need more? I'm like, no, you don't. You just need one. He's like, all right. And then I have another guy. He's so funny. He's like, I want 1 million shares. I'm like, okay, all right, you can have 1 million shares. And so we gave him 1 million. He's got a certificate for 1 million shares in his company. It made him happy. There's a slight tax issue on consequently, you pay a little bit, but whatever. He didn't care. He was excited about it. A C-corp, as we talked about, can have multiple classes of stock. We talked about common, preferred, right? They're just ways that people get money out of the company. That is not true in an S-Corp. You have a board of directors. New York State allows you to have a single board director if you are owned by one person. So that's not a problem. And then you appoint officers. The typical officers are a president, a secretary, and a treasurer. A secretary does not mean the person who types. A corporate secretary means someone who maintains the corporate books and records. Because one of the things you have to do is down here, the corporate formalities have to be observed, meaning you take minutes, you take notes about meetings, you say, this is the decision that we came up with, and here's how we're going to enact it, and here's who has the authority to do that. My firm, one of the services we offer to clients is we will create your minutes for you at the end of the year or at meetings that you take place. So that you keep those formalities observed. We send you a 100-question questionnaire, and you fill it out, and then we create the minutes for you. Like I said, companies can be very investor attractive, and they have a perpetual existence. Once you form a corporation, you have to dissolve it formally for it to go away. Just because the owner of a company dies doesn't mean that the company dies. A corporation, we have to actually dissolve it. And the way that you form a company is you have to file the articles of incorporation. New York State requires that a company have bylaws. Bylaws are simply the rules of the road of how the company runs. We're going to meet on the second Tuesday of every February. We will have, we pay dividends if profitability, if EBITDA exceeds whatever. Officers will be appointed for these positions. Officers will have a term of 1 year, 2 year, 5 years. The board will have staggered terms, single term. Like there's lots of questions that can come up in this. And so bylaws regulate how the company is run. Minutes and resolutions we've talked about. And then if there are multiple shareholders, I often recommend a shareholders agreement. That's a separate document between the people who own it. So let's say Willa and Ronnie go into business together and they form a company. I would urge them, because they're friends, and the thing I care about when clients come to me, because I get lots of best friends who want to start a company together. And I say, I want you to start the company together and I want you to remain friends. And so we're going to have either a shareholders agreement or a buy-sell agreement or whatever we call it, depending on the entity. And we're going to talk in there about how someone gets out if they don't want to stay in. So, because that happens a lot. I had 5 guys come to me and say they wanted to start a business together. And I said, that's wonderful. In 1 year, at least one of you will be gone. And what are we going to do about John not wanting to be in the company then? And so we negotiated out a complex buyout and bonus agreement and all of this stuff. And guess what? At the end of the year, 2 of the guys were gone. But that was okay, because the business didn't fail because of it. It didn't run aground because now people weren't there. We were able to negotiate out their shares. We were able to buy them out. They left. The guys are still friends, and the company continued. So shareholders agreements are very important because they say how you're going to vote, how you're going to act, and how you can get out if you need to. An LLC is owned through membership units, and it has a very flexible ownership structure. It can be one people, it can be a team of people, it can be member managed, it can be manager managed. I can have I can have Class A members who run the company and Class B members who sit and take the profits first. It's up to your imagination how you want to run an LLC. It's less formal. As I put, investors semi-attractive for the reasons that Willa clearly told us about as a commercial lender, also as an investor, because things can be so complicated in discussions, you have to spend more time understanding the LLC, and it can have a limited or a perpetual existence. I can say that the LLC is going to exist for 5 years, or I can say it's indefinite. I can pick anything I want. And to form an LLC, this is very important. Articles of organization, and we've already talked about the certificate of publication. You got to do the publication. Operating agreement is the rules of the road of how the business operates. It's like the bylaws for the company. Minutes and resolutions, we do that too, to just corporate record keeping is a good thing to have in general. And then this buy-sell agreement for if people want to leave, it's akin to the shareholder agreement. So one of the persons, I think it was Barry, said, if I want to spin something off, you can. What we would do if you have a company, let's say I have a company, Acme Inc., and I want to have Acme Tools. So I form Acme Tools, and then I sell part of the assets of Acme Inc. to Acme Tools. I have an asset purchase agreement. I transfer those assets down to Acme Tools. I now have a relationship between the two as a subsidiary or as an affiliate, depending on how I want to form it. And then I can have the ownership of Acme Tools be wholly owned by Acme Inc. only if it's an LLC or if it's a C-corp. The company can own the shares. I can't do it as an S-corp because an S-corp can't be owned by another company. So I wanted to hit that question since it was asked. If you are a licensed professional, you have certain requirements in New York State that you have to adhere to. So if you're an attorney, doctor, physical therapist, CPA, licensed social worker, a psychologist, massage therapist, acupuncturist, those are just a few of the ones, a nurse practitioner, a nurse,
a nail technician.
Yeah, I'm sorry?
Did you say a nail technician or?
I don't know if know if a nail technician is a licensed profession for the purpose of entity. An engineer is an architect. all of those have to get a professional organization. And all we do is put a P at the front of the thing. So instead of a corporation, you form a professional corporation. Instead of an LLC, you form a PLLC. If you look, my company is Love Law Firm. Whoa, why does it do that to me? PLLC, see it down here. I am a professional limited liability company. You may see Smith and Jones CPAs, PC. They're a professional corporation, okay? In order to form that, we have to get permission from the Department of Ed. That's what DOE is, to form the entity. And we have to send them an affidavit that you have to sign in front of a notary telling them about your decision to form. I have to give them a copy of your license, and then they have to approve you. With COVID and the pandemic and the remote workforce, what used to be a couple-week process is now a couple-month process, depending on the license. And so if you want to form a professional entity, it's better to do it early on rather than wait till the last minute, because you're going to then wait a couple months. And also the naming convention is limited. I can guarantee you that the state has absolutely no sense of whimsy or humor. They just don't. I had a mental health counselor want to form an entity called Out of the Muck and the Mire Counseling. Right? And I liked it. I thought that, it's kind of cute. And I said, I don't know that they're going to approve it because, again, they're not fun. And they literally, the letter they sent back cracked me up. For the first time, I found someone with a slight sense of humor. They said, we highly doubt that you are practicing therapy in the muck and the mire. And so we rejected. And I was like, well, that's very literal and very true. She's not going to the muck and the mire. And so we had to go with something much more standard, like, Barbara B. Smith, mental health counselor, PC, Okay, we tried. So if you're coming up with something fun, you don't. And if you're trying to come up with things, like I had a doctor try to have healthy pediatrics, PC, and they said healthy is a promise. What if the kid gets sick or dies or, okay, right. So we won't do that. So that's interesting. If you do own a licensed entity, only other licensed professionals can own it. So I am a licensed attorney. My spouse is not. Therefore, they don't own any part of my entity. They can't. They're not allowed to. And then, like I said, the current lead time for DOE permission is about 2 months. It depends on the profession. Lawyers, we can turn it around in 24 hours. Everyone else is a little bit longer.
Francine, my question, I just wanted to make sure that DOE was the Department of Education.
It is.
Terrific.
It is.
Thank you.
Yes. So in conclusion, being an entrepreneur is one of the best, most rewarding, exciting, incredible things you can feel. I love it. I love being an entrepreneur. I get up every day excited about running my business. I love being my own boss. I guarantee you I would be a terrible employee at this point. I just would be an awful employee to have, because I love running a business. It gets me excited. I love thinking about ways to market. I love thinking about how I can do good things for the community. I love thinking about how I can grow the business and employ people and give a great place for people to work. I love that my dog, my English bulldog, is the mascot, and he sits on my chair as I do things and he snores away happily. And that makes the quality of my life amazing. So I can emphasize how wonderful it is to be an entrepreneur. It's scary. It's, it's a risk sometimes. You're putting eggs in the basket of you. But wow, is it worth it? It's just so much fun. So
Great.
I'm so glad that we have resources like there at Stony Brook with Willa, with Ronnie, with everyone there to help you, because entrepreneurship can be a bit lonely, because you're like, oh my God, look at all the things I have to do. And having people who can help you is so important. My law firm, one of the things we tell our clients is, once you're our client, we're here for the long run. We want to see you grow and expand, and we're here to help you. I tell my clients, once you have engaged me and I've done work for you, I have a free, I have a policy that if you come to me with a question, as long as it takes me 20 minutes or less, it's on the house. It's not, I'm never going to charge you for it, because I'd rather hear from you and know what's going on and prevent you from doing something that might hurt you, or say, don't worry about it, go for it, and let you feel reassured, than have you go out and not talk to me because you're afraid that you're going to get some ridiculous bill. That's not the way we work. Our law firm's motto is build, B-U-I-L-D, not build, B-I-L-L-E-D. So we're about helping you build your business, not billing you for the privilege of helping you. And our other tagline is, isn't it time you learn to love your lawyer? I believe that the practice of law should be kind and humane. One of my, not colleagues, one of my competitors wrote that he was a sociopath on your side.
Oh, lovely.
I can't think of anything worse in this world than a sociopath. I certainly don't want him on my side. I think that people who are in professions have a responsibility to educate, to help, and to be kind. And so that is what we try to do. So I hope that this presentation has met your expectations, Ronnie and Willa.
Oh, definitely. I have a bunch of questions.
Beautiful. I'm happy to answer.
First thing is, I see this is, I don't know if this is your very last slide, but please, would you type up your, anyone can, there you go. If you haven't looked at Francine's website, you should, because it really explains a lot about what she just said about what she believes her business is. So Francine, I'm thrilled to know you. I want to thank Willa for introducing me to you, because you're so perfect for so many of our clients. And thank you so much.
Wonderful.
Yeah, you are a real great find. So thank you. I thank you thanks, Willa. I don't know how you came together with Francine, but she's a wonderful resource. So thanks.
Yeah. And she came recommended from another attorney that I happen to know. So, you know, attorneys all kind of have their
specialty
field of expertise. Yes. And Francine was definitely for small business. And we are coming to the end of our workshop time. So I don't want to go without saying thank you very much, Francine, for your time today. We know how important that is. And for everyone who has attended, and I hope you all got value. We do record the workshop and put it on our website. And that's the best part of the pandemic, is that we've learned how to do that. And it made it very, very easy to watch anytime, day or night. You can pick up this information, have it in the background, listen to it. And so we thank you all very much for attending, and most especially to Francine for sharing her expertise with our small business community.
Totally. Thank you so much. It's been great. And those of you, if anybody else, there's one person that's in the SEEP program through New York State. If you don't know what it is, then you're not in it. If you're in the SEEP program, get in touch with Leslie and she can refer you to me or someone else who can help you fill out your paperwork. So thanks.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Have a great day.
Thank you,
Francine.
Doreen.
Thank
Everyone
you.
take care. Stay well.
Okay. Take care. Bye.